Hello and welcome to the LongView Real Estate Podcast. In this episode, I'm talking with LongView Real Estate Executive Chair Evan Thornley about the agency's guaranteed rent product. We'll be discussing why it works and how it was created by property investors for property investors. I wonder if you can just walk us through how the concept works at LongView.
Yeah, well, I think what we do is actually new. There's a small number of people in the property industry who'll offer you guaranteed rent on their property because they're trying to sell it to you, but there's no one who'll offer you guaranteed rent on your property that you already own, that you're already the landlord of. And the reason we've created it, LongView is a company built by property investors for property investors. And the first thing every property investor knows is every once in a while the property's going to be vacant, or if you're not careful, you'll have a tenant who's not paying their rent or not paying their rent on time. So one of the biggest risks in being a property investor is that uncertainty. And so what we wanted to do was take that uncertainty away. And our guaranteed rent product simply means that you'll get the exact same amount of money at the exact same time every month for as far into the future as you want to do it, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years.
So that would be my very first question if I was coming in considering taking on guaranteed rent with LongView would be, well, how are you able to take on the risk? What have you done to be able to run your business profitably, because that's why you're in business, but also shoulder the burden of risk?
Well, I think the difference is, we both have the scale and the expertise to be able to manage that risk, where the individual landlord doesn't. The scale, the expertise and the control. So firstly, we manage nearly 1,900 properties across Melbourne. So, the vacancy rate in Melbourne on any given day is about 2%. That sounds good. There's only a 2% chance your property is going to be vacant. But if you're one of those 2% of people, it's no comfort to you that 98 other people are getting their rent when you're not, right? The second reason is because we can control it. It's our job. This is what we do for a living, is to find good tenants, make sure they pay their rent on time and make sure they're replaced quickly if they don't. So, if you like, we're fully incented to make sure we do that properly, because if we don't, you're right, we would lose money. But right now, the rest of the industry, the rest of the real estate industry says to landlords, if I don't do my job, it's your problem. You lose money, not me. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Guaranteed rent, with that sort of guarantee, I would have thought logically that it might come with some higher management fees. Is that the case or not?
No, look, our management fees are pretty much right in the middle of the market. We're a long way from being the most expensive agency. We'll never be the cheapest agency because pay peanuts, get monkeys. But we don't need to charge additional management fees. What we do is sit down and say, okay, over the next 3 years, how much vacancy will your property have? It's unlikely there's going to be one tenant the whole time. So let's assume over 3 years, for example, there'll probably be one change of tenant. How long will that usually be? Let's even out that risk over the whole 3 years. So every month for 36 months, we give you the exact same amount of money. So I'm not trying to pretend that you're going to get more rent than you will elsewhere, but I can guarantee you won't get less, and I can guarantee you will get the same amount every month.
Must have been on a long holiday, or your head's under the bed covers if you haven't read what's been going on in the property market in terms of the downturn in values. I couldn't think in recent times of a better time to go for guaranteed rent if you're worried about selling your property, just to ride out the storm that's here at the moment. And if you read some of the language, there's even worse pain to come.
It is a much tougher time to be a property owner and investor right now, and so it's all the more important to have stable cash flow. You've got enough other things to worry about. You don't want to be worrying about whether your property is going to be vacant or your tenants are going to cause problems in terms of paying their rent on time. So we're definitely finding that. I mean, we've got clients talking to us at the moment about land tax in Victoria has gone up substantially. At the same time that prices have gone down, that's really hurting people. If they want to sell their property, they're finding that it's worth less than it was and sometimes less than what they paid for it. So that's not a good option. The banks are often asking them to move from interest-only loans to principal and interest loans. So suddenly they have to have more cash flow. So there's a lot of pressures on property investors and landlords at the moment. The last thing they need is the toothache to come back right in the middle of that and find that their property's vacant or their tenant hasn't paid their rent on time. But I think part of what I'm learning as I have this conversation with landlords is, firstly, a number of them, they sort of know that having an empty property happens every once in a while, but partly because you sort of don't know when or for how long. It's a bit like a toothache. You know you're going to get one every once in a while. You know it's going to be painful, but you don't know when you're going to get it. You don't know how painful it's going to be. And so you sort of think there's nothing you can do about it. So you just put up with the fact that every once in a while you get a toothache. Now, if somebody came along and said, actually, you remember the last time you had a toothache? Oh, yeah, it was horrible. Do you remember when it was? Oh, not exactly, but I don't know, it was a year or two ago. Do you remember how long it lasted for? Oh, no, but geez, it felt like a while. And how painful was it? I know it was pretty painful. Okay, how would you like to not have any more toothaches ever?
Be good, wouldn't it?
That would be great.
At LongView, you're offering much more breadth in terms of the options, whether it's guaranteed rent or Airbnb.
Yeah.
And I think that's, in terms of the contemporary real estate market and real estate agents, I think that's a fantastic move, isn't it?
Well, again, we're a real estate agency founded by property investors. And, you know, how does a property investor make their money? By buying the right property and holding it for a long time, possibly forever. You know, our definition of success is not when you sell the property, it's when it's worth so much more that you can buy another one on the back of what you've made on that one and buy a second and a third and a fourth property. So trying to get people to sell their property all the time is the last thing that you should be doing with property investors. Now, of course, there are times when our clients do choose to or need to sell a property, and I think we're actually very good at helping them there. But we're not trying to force them into it, whereas a traditional local real estate agent, they make most of their money by selling properties, so they spend their whole time trying to tell people to sell the property. And so the industry's incentives are completely out of alignment with the customer's incentive. And so, again, we wanted to create a player in the market that takes the same, you know, that's aligned, where our interests are aligned with your interests. And if your interests are long-term, we should be delivering a service that's going to be there for the long term. And as a property investor, the main thing you need is not someone who can talk you into selling your property. The main thing you need is somebody who's going to deliver stable property management week in, week out for decades, and then give you good advice on when it's appropriate to sell or to buy or to renovate, and who can start meeting some of the other practical needs you have, like getting rid of the vacancy toothache, or like looking at, well, hang on a minute, could this make substantially more money in Airbnb?